Welcome. Today we're going to be talking about this book, Unit X, How the Pentagon and Silicon Valley are Transforming the Future of War, written by Raj M. Shah and Christopher Kirchhoff. It tells the story of how Raj and Christopher created a experimental division of the United States Pentagon that was based in Silicon Valley. It was known as the Defense Innovation Unit Experimental and had a sort of nickname of Unit X. And its purpose was to take the latest innovation and technology from Silicon Valley, mainly on the commercial sector, and bring it into the United States Department of Defense, such as to increase the capabilities of the US military and potentially save money as compared to traditional methods of defense procurement. On the front cover, you see, and for those of you just listening, essentially there's an iPhone with a F-35 parked on top of it to sort of signify the potential cross-pollination between a very advanced modern jet, the F-35. I can't tell you which variant that is of A, B, or C, but so they sat there, and then with an iPhone as being an example of advanced hardware, but also software from the Silicon Valley. Okay, so it's a new book, came out in 2014, but it tells a story that starts in 2015, 2016, when Raj Shah and Christopher Kirchhoff essentially came in and rebooted what was a initially started organization, Unit X, the Defense Innovation Unit Experimental, but was floundering, and they came in to restart it, repivot it, and make it successful. So you should really watch this video and learn about the book and read the book if, one, you're either interested in improving defense procurement, two, you're interested in military history, or three, you're interested in how to improve the innovation processes of legacy organizations. That could be defense, but it could be any sort of large organization. So you could see how this could apply to large healthcare providers, hospital systems, or large automotive companies looking to increase the amount of innovation that they have and bring on advanced technologies. Okay, so key point really of the book, and I'll be reading from my notes. I've got 11 pages of A4 notes here. You can get hold of them with the link in the description. So if you look on the link on the description on YouTube or whatever platform you're viewing this on, there's a link, and you can get this A4 set of notes, which is helpful if you want to look back on these things. Okay, so the key idea, really, that we should kick off with is that Shah and Kirchhoff say essentially the US military and allied militaries must embrace commercial technology. In particular, AI is one that they call out. Also, drones, so autonomous flying sort of objects for surveillance or bringing munitions to a battlefield or supplies, to maintain competitive edge. So they must embrace commercial technology, and adversaries, be it mainland China or Russia, are doing this, and current conflicts, be it in Ukraine right now, or expected conflicts in sort of other contested areas, are expected to utilize a large amount of commercial technology. And this differs from, if we think about in World War II or the Cold War, the most advanced technology would have been in the military and created by governments and organizations like NASA, things like that. But we've seen a major shift where the technology available in the commercial sector, and Silicon Valley is used as an example as a location where there's large amounts of innovation and new technology being brought into the future and available to consumers, and that this isn't available to the military as quickly as it should be. And the two authors have interesting backgrounds. So Raj M. Shah, he was an F-16 pilot in the for the US, forget which state, but a National Guard, and he was sent to Iraq. And in 2006, he was flying a mission along the Iraqi-Iran border, so he would be on the Iraqi side. And evidently, it would be incredibly bad if he were to stray into Iran. This would cause major political issue. And at the time, his F-16, this is flying at night, had no moving map GPS style system. So today, we're recording this in 2024. Most people are familiar with Google Maps, or your car, your inbuilt car navigation system shows you your position with regard to the rest of the world, the road network, and it updates as you drive along. So you drive past a junction, an intersection, and you see it there, you see the road names, and then you move forward. And so you've got this real-time feedback of your position. And at the time, in Raj's F-16, he didn't have that capability, despite essentially being in a situation that was incredibly more dangerous with regard to if he were to stray over the border. So he, on his own, took his compact iPac. If people remember those, they were kind of like personal digital assistant, PDA. So before the iPhone, but around that time of a small handheld sort of tablet-like device. And on it, he was running essentially commercial mapping software such that he could have a moving map while in the air. And it's kind of amazing to think that a device that you could just buy in a shop was able to provide him capability that his jet couldn't. And this was clearly very impactful upon him with regard to how to ensure that the military would have the latest capabilities, and those capabilities would be incredibly important when this is 2006 in Iraq, so there's some very big issues with the insurgency at that point, and he is having to essentially augment his jet with technology that he's just bought in a shop. So that was the sort of origin story of Raj Shah with regard to this infusion of technology and his experience as a Air Force pilot. And then he founded and ran a cybersecurity company, and then is brought in as a managing partner of DIUx, the Defense Innovation Unit Experimental, in 2016. And then his partner, a co-author of the book, and another member of the DIUx in 2016 was Christopher Kirchhoff, if I'm pronouncing that right. And Christopher has a PhD from Cambridge University. He's a political scientist and a former NSC strategist, National Security Council under Obama. And he was brought in to be a person who understood the political aspects of defense procurements, and rather than a pure technologist. So the pair of them had clearly a very good working relationship, and they essentially document what happened in Unit X, the DIU experimental, over the course of, as I said, 2015, 2016, where it really starts off, up until 2022, pretty much, which is when Russia invaded Ukraine. And they show how the battlefield had massively changed at 2022, and the types of technologies that were being fielded by both Ukraine and Russia. So the problem statement that they convey is one of the technology that is being fielded by the US military, and by extension we can apply that to allied militaries, is behind in many critical areas, be it AI and machine learning, cloud computing, autonomous technologies, so drones and robotics. And so it is lagging behind the commercial sector, and by extension lagging behind adversaries, as it appears, as they talk about, that adversaries, particularly China, have much better collaborations between the commercial sector and the Chinese military. So in 2015, Ash Carter, who was the US Secretary of Defense, he decided to create the Defense Innovation Unit Experimental to be based in Silicon Valley and bridge the gap between what is happening in startup world with military needs, because the United States has all of this technology. This technology exists, is world class, and it ought to be available to the US military. And so they talk through several success stories that happened over this journey. Sail drone is one example. There's autonomous sea drones for marine surveillance. So you imagine big fleet of these autonomous sailing robots, and sailing as in they use the wind to move across the ocean and obtain power and do remote sensing. Capella Space, which is a satellite company that created a type of radar imaging system, which was used to monitor North Korea and also Ukraine. And then Anduril Industries, which is very famous for being founded by Palmer Luckey, who was the creator of the Oculus VR headset, which is itself very famous, and they've done a lot with AI-powered drones and border security surveillance technologies. So on the US-Mexico border, and I believe also in Israel on their sort of contested border areas. Okay, so for this video, we'll go through a series of questions, and we'll answer them using the book. And if there are other questions you have, be sure to write them down in the comments below. And as I said, if you want the notes, be sure to click on the link below as well, and I'll send them to you. So part 1, what is the central idea or argument of the book, and why does it matter? So the US military is at risk or has fallen behind global technological competition. And this is primarily because the commercial sector has advanced much further than the US military has been able to absorb those technologies. And the DIUx, the Defense Innovation Unit Experimental, Unit X, bridges the gap between Silicon Valley innovation and the Pentagon, essentially bureaucracy. And the book argues that this is incredibly necessary because there are a whole host of commercial technologies, be it AI, drones, and autonomy, that if not adopted by the US military and are adopted or have been shown to be adopted by adversaries, then essentially US military superiority is no longer maintained. So that's the key idea. And the book then takes us through the journey to create such a unit, the Unit X. And this journey is a challenge. You are dealing with one of the world's largest organizations in terms of just number of employed people, and to do change, that term, change management, things like that, within very, very large organizations like that, where there's a lot of money on the line as well, is incredibly difficult. And that could be generalized not simply to military, but to any very large organization. As I mentioned, the DIUx was created in 2015 under Secretary of Defense Ash Carter, and the two authors of the book were two of the leaders of it in the 2016 right up through to sort of 2022. But the main story of the book is 2015 through 2018. Okay. Now there's urgency that is identified by Shah and Kirchhoff, in that the rate of innovation in very recent conflicts, and the 2022 invasion of Russia has been a real eye-opener, and they use it as an example of where we're potentially seeing what the future trends of warfare even are. But the speed of adopting of new technologies is occurring so incredibly rapidly that an important capability is to be able to do that. Otherwise, you do risk falling behind. And warfare has always been around a game of essentially arms races, and capability one-upmanship is evident since the Roman times and before that. In sense, if one side is able to field technologies that essentially magnify what could be done with one person, this is only going to increase, especially with autonomy. And so essentially you won't be able to guarantee your own security or win wars if you cannot adopt new technology quickly. Okay, so I've spoken a lot about technology here, but an additional key idea that the authors bring to bear is one of cultural and bureaucratic, sorry, I can pronounce that right, challenges. So the biggest obstacle they viewed of the Pentagon adopting technologies that are clearly beneficial is one of essentially dealing with an incredibly large organization. And they use the examples of Ukraine, where especially sort of early into the conflict, Ukraine had to essentially adopt whatever technology was available and could be done quickly and had capability that was proven to be working on the battlefield. And often is the case where there is a strong forcing function of necessity. This can be done, but when we're not in that mode of outright conflict, it can be that paranoia isn't necessarily always present, which should be, and thus the need to adopt it's easy to kick something into the long grass, or to avoid it, or to do something that is potentially easier but not necessarily as impactful. And so they really do stress throughout the story their challenges of getting adoption, even though essentially every single person within the organization and every sort of American politician would want the US military to have the best capability and to be able to defend their nation. and yet the organization as a whole doesn't necessarily exhibit that, just due to the nature of big bureaucracy. Okay, so I've taken you through the sort of key ideas there. Now if we think about, so how is this book organized and how should we be reading it? So this is sort of, we're moving into the part 2 of this video. Well, the table of contents and the book overall is one of organized in the chronology of how this all played out. Essentially what occurred and when it all occurred. And that makes it quite an interesting read just to read from cover to cover, because it is all ordered in time. You could potentially just dip into the later chapters if you were sort of more interested in what does this thing look like now. However, I would suggest against doing that if you've got the time, in that the early chapters explain to you the challenges of adoption and also the necessity, which you would miss that. And if you were implementing for yourself, if you hadn't looked at those early chapters, you could potentially run into the same mistakes that they did, and it's be advisable to avoid that. So essentially, yes, they are organized chronologically, from the formation in 2015 right through to February 2022 when the Russia invasion of Ukraine, and then August 2022 with the CHIPS Act, which was around increasing the incentives to manufacture high-end semiconductors domestically within the United States. So if we go through the table of contents then, so introduction, it's called slow burn. And the slow burn is symbolizing a sort of gradually escalating crisis caused by a failure of the Pentagon to keep pace with modern technology, which they view as in the authors, Shah and Kirchhoff, view as leading to strategic vulnerabilities. So it sets the stage for this urgency, and that example of the F-16 piloted by Shah flying on that Iraq-Iran border, and how he's got his own $300 PDA strapped to his leg, showing the map, because the aircraft itself doesn't have that functionality, and he's only flying with that thing strapped to his leg to avoid flying unintentionally into Iran and causing an incredibly major international incident. And so this is clearly, that's one example, and I could imagine if a survey was done across the entire military, there must be many, many examples of similar situations. So then on to chapter 2, known as Unit X. So this describes the founding in 2015 and its initial failures, and then how it's rebooted with Shah and Kirchhoff coming in to lead it. And the Unit X is this term they adopt for the DIUx as its formal term. Then on chapter 2, zeroized. So zeroized is a term that is used when your budget is set to zero, and it was set to zero without being Unit X being informed. So this is an example of the how the organization, the big organization, can act with a bit of a sort of immune reaction to eliminate even a initiative that has been set up directly by the Secretary of Defense, Ash Carter, and yet individual Congress members can interfere, and essentially they eliminated its budget. They get it to they get it back, clearly, because the book comes by there, but they use an example to be very much aware that even a organization with essentially there's no controversy as to with regard to the capabilities it's trying to bring to the US military, and yet the overlap of politics and bureaucracy can lead to very troubling situations like this. But they are able to get their budget back by promising to do some stuff in various parts of the country, and also just that their main focus is to increase the capability for the military, and it isn't just funneling money to Silicon Valley for the sake of it. Chapter 3, the gonculator. The gonculator is a term that comes from a TV show called Hogan's Heroes, which was set in a World War II POW camp. But anyway, gonculator is a term for a very, very complex and obsolete system of running things. And the gonculator was the nickname that was given to a manual process that was used to schedule air-to-air refueling tankers out of Qatar that were servicing essentially the whole Middle East, especially during the book covers the time of the rise of ISIS, and when coalition forces were having to bomb them at short notice, and the aircraft that do the bombings don't have the onboard fuel capacity to fly the full mission, and instead they rely on various tanker aircraft and they refuel mid-flight. And all of this scheduling was being done essentially using a system very similar to that developed in World War II around sort of the Battle of Britain. And they use this an example of where they fly out to this vast Air Force base in Qatar, which when they first see it, they find that it does resemble something from London in World War II, with moving around little models that represent these different aircraft. That chapter 3 talks about this, and we'll talk about that more later in this video because it's very important, as they solve or they improve this drastically. Chapter 4, a new kill chain for North Korea. So a kill chain refers to the steps to essentially target to then release munitions to destroy that target. And this chapter talks about how the difficulties of even spotting potential launches of North Korean ballistic missiles, and how they develop or fund new satellite technologies to spot this stuff, especially when it's with high cloud cover. Chapter 5, Unit X loses the X. So this is when DIUx has evolved enough to no longer be experimental, and it's viewed as a permanent fixture, which is incredibly important because it shows that they have done good enough work to be declared to be permanent. Okay. Then on to chapter 6, Washington and the Rise of Machines. So this talks about AI. So a big theme as if there is any technology that is being not adopted quick enough and must be, or they advocate for being adopted more quickly, it is AI. Chapter 7, Venture Capital Goes to War. So here they talk about how traditionally, let's talk about sort of around World War II, post-World War II, Silicon Valley was essentially reliant on a lot of military spending, and was the interaction between the military and the commercial sector was very thriving. But in sort of more recent times, in sort of the times of the World Wide Web, so sort of that 2001, right through maybe to 2020, 2022, that time, there had been a big gap had developed between those two important areas of society. And in chapter 7, they explain how like the bridges now there have been bridges built, and the rise of Palantir, as a classic example of a Palantir is a spin out of PayPal, and essentially funded is a somewhat more traditional Silicon Valley company, but whose primary customer became national intelligence agencies. And chapter 7 is very, if you're interested in how there's been this transition now, such that Silicon Valley and venture capital there is a thriving ecosystem that is willing to support the military, and we've moved away from those challenges of, say, the sort of early 2000s, the first couple of decades of the 2000s. Then chapter 8, Ukraine and the battlefield of the future. So using Ukraine as a case study for where they view warfare headed, and this sort of digitally enabled warfare and augmenting of the capabilities of individual people, and also the reduction in cost to field advanced capabilities. And then chapter 9, from steel to silicon. So this is a reflection on how AI, software-enabled, these types of topics are now increasingly, or are only increasing in their importance, and sort of steel being an example of where I think they're almost kind of using that term to mean big battleships, aircraft carriers. These are important, but can they be sunk by a swarm of, you could imagine, AI drone ships? There's been examples in Ukraine of big Russian ships being sunk by drone kamikaze naval drone type things. So this is important. And then it talks about the CHIPS Act in 2022, which CHIPS stands for creating helpful incentives to produce semiconductors. So somebody probably wanted that acronym, and then worked backwards to figure out what it would be called. Okay, so that's taking you through the table of contents. We now have a series of questions from the book, that we'll ask of the book, and use them to give you further depth in what DIUx really was all about. So part 3 of this video, what is DIUx and why was it created, and what makes it unique? So as I said, DIUx is the term for the Defense Innovation Unit Experimental. But as I said, over the last few years, it's dropped the X because it's no longer experimental. So it is simply the Defense Innovation Unit. And it was established in 2015 to bring Silicon Valley innovation to the Department of Defense. Unique approach, operated outside of traditional procurement channels to move faster, and big innovations that it's had to do have been on the legal side, and reading the fine print, discovering loopholes is probably not quite the right word, but places where they could procure things and get money to Silicon Valley firms, not simply in Silicon Valley, but those of that nature, such that they could develop technologies or procure technologies to the US military that otherwise wouldn't be able to be done. So DIU does not create technology, and it doesn't replace defense contractors. its aim is to accelerate acquisition and to integrate those advanced technologies into the military's capability. So what they do is essentially identify technologies or companies out there that have things that would support the US military and procure them and bring them in, as opposed to being a literal, skunk works, Lockheed Martin skunk work, which has developed technologies itself in isolation from the main organization. So maybe it's best to view it as a innovative procurement channel of the US military, and is explicitly officed in Silicon Valley. That was deliberate. They wanted to be, they were coming to the Silicon Valley firms as opposed to being based in Washington and asking those firms to come to them. They wanted to show that the US DoD could be a great customer for Silicon Valley technology firms, as opposed to, which had been the case, essentially being a incredibly burdensome customer, one that is slow to respond, one that would pay slowly. And there are examples in here in the book around venture capital investors telling startups not to do business with the US military because it would be detrimental to their firm, and they wanted to completely destroy that, any perception of that or any reality of that. So DIUx could waive bureaucratic obstacles, and also they had their own lawyers on staff to find those loopholes I spoke about. And essentially it's designed to operate at the speed of Silicon Valley as opposed to the speed of traditional procurement in the Pentagon. So part 4 of this video, what are some of the key challenges the US military faces in adopting new technology? I pulled out 4 here: bureaucracy and risk aversion, cultural divide, resistance from incumbents, and ethical concerns. So I haven't mentioned there anything around the technology being too advanced. Like an F-22 or an F-35, these, and pick your favorite highly complicated or complex military system, a nuclear attack submarine. These are clearly incredibly advanced technologies that require a lot of expertise to run. So the US military doesn't have a challenge of maintaining or operating advanced technologies, but those that I listed there, bureaucracy and risk aversion, these are challenges of the organization. And that zeroized anecdote, where their budget was just eliminated. They had a purpose to adopt new technologies, and then they set the budget of the department that is, or the unit that was set up to do that, and set it to 0. So clearly that's not going to help in adopting new technologies. Cultural divide. So they talk about essentially just, these are all English-speaking American people. You'd think you get them in the room and we can now talk business and make progress. But even just the different clothings people wear, the different sort of aspirations people have, this in itself was a challenge. Resistance from the incumbents. So they talk about in some of the cases where there was an incumbent who was supposed to be building a capability, but it was taking a phenomenal amount of time and it was incredibly expensive, and that incumbent would actively do its best to ensure that the approach DIUx was adopting was, let's say, hindered. They go into more detail as to the specifics of that. And then ethical concerns. So some Silicon Valley firms had employees who didn't want to do work for the military on sort of principle like that. But then when we move into autonomous and AI systems, and should what level of autonomy are you prepared to have lethal systems having? This is something which they talk about would really need to be dealt with on international treaties, because essentially if one country is willing to push how far they're willing to have with regard to autonomous systems that can unleash lethal force, it becomes a sort of arms race. But certainly there's all these ethical concerns with this new type of technology is very important. And we can think about arms control. Arms control isn't, people often think about it as just nuclear weapons, but of course there were limits on the number of battleships that could be that any one country could have. This is sort of before World War II, and Japan was limited to a certain number, the US, the British Empire, etc. And also after World War One, Germany had an extremely limited air force, and that was sort of written into the post World War One settlement. Okay, so that was talking about the challenges in adopting new technology, and as I say, all of the ones they describe in the book are ones of culture and bureaucracy, as opposed to actually the difficulty of developing technology into itself. So part 5 of this video, how did DIUx overcome resistance from Congress and within the Pentagon? So they traveled a lot to Washington and had direct engagement with politicians. They wanted to, essentially, a key selling point they were having was that they were showing how adversaries were advancing so very quickly in technology, and that the US would be falling behind, if not had fallen behind, in certain technologies. So they didn't just remain on the west coast of the US doing their own thing. They actively would fly back and forth to show what they were doing and why it was so important. Perhaps, well, actually, I'm not going to rank the, just then I thought to rank the importance, but actually I think that all of these perhaps have sort of fairly equal importance. So they had executive support in that they were created by the Secretary of Defense, Ash Carter. So yeah, if that weren't the case, there could be, the idea of getting a budget at all might be almost impossible. So that high level support sort of shielded them from potentially what could have been bureaucratic resistance that would be even impossible to overcome. Because ultimately the big boss, well, in the US system, at least, the president's above that, but the boss there wanted the unit. Delivering tangible results was incredibly important for them once they were actually set up. So I spoke about that air-to-air refueling scheduler, the Gonculator, as it was called, the COAC, so that's the Combined Air Operations Center, based in that massive Air Force base in Qatar, which was essentially the air traffic control of all military flights over the Middle East, which is a phenomenal amount. And they delivered tangible results in that they got a Silicon Valley firm to create the software in a way that essentially using a more sort of Scrum-based or Agile, or however you want to frame it, but essentially talking to the users, developing capability, deploying that capability, testing that capability, building upon that capability, versus the sort of more waterfall type approach, which was in parallel being developed and never actually produced any capability that could be used. And they then developed a software factory called Kessel Run, and that's sort of taken from Star Wars, where the Millennium Falcon flying very quickly, to essentially build software capabilities incredibly quickly. And so by doing that, even those skeptics who did exist that there could be any value in the approach that Silicon Valley advocated, that they were convinced that there were actual tangible results and capabilities that should be adopted because they were actually shown to be done. And then building coalitions. So, key stakeholders within the military and Congress were made aware of what was up to, and it worked to ensure that everyone was getting something that would be beneficial to them. I think as well, though, we have to be clear, though, like a key benefit or key unifying thing of everybody who's involved is that everybody wants the US military to be stronger and more capable. If we were applying this maybe to some sort of different topic, it might be more challenging to do this. Okay, part 6 of the video. What are some real-world examples of innovations enabled by DIUx? So I've got, I picked out 6 here. There are more. You can look in the book for more of them. So the tanker refueling out of, the COAC, as I described just a moment ago. Replacing what was a incredibly manual process. And it isn't just the inefficiency of the guys who are actually doing it. There's also, because the scheduling was done manually, there were, and things change on the ground, and say a bomber aircraft has to linger for longer over an area because the target has disappeared for a bit. They then had to, on short notice, call a whole new tanker up into the air to refuel that other aircraft because there had been sort of changes on the ground. And those changes on the ground are going to occur. This is a battlefield. And that's incredibly expensive to get to get an additional aircraft up into the air. But by using the app, they were able to actually identify using software where a existing tanker that was already in the sky could be rerouted or reroute a different bomber aircraft to a different location for refueling, and thus save a phenomenal amount of money in having all these tanker aircraft on standby ready to go up into the air and then do the refueling operations. I've spoken previously about the Kessel Run software factory. Capella Space developed a synthetic aperture radar satellites, and the key thing they were bringing as a capability was the ability for a high frequency of update, in that they had a lot of satellites in the sky, so you would get a refreshing picture of what's going on the ground more frequently, and also to see through cloud cover. Much of the military involvement have been over the Middle East, where there isn't much cloud cover, whereas now conflict has moved, or is in addition in Ukraine, and also monitoring of North Korea, where cloud cover is the norm. You needed this new capability to be able to see through the clouds. Sail drone, I mentioned that previously in this video, so autonomous seafaring drones. And it's actually quite an interesting company in that their founder is a British guy, sailing enthusiast, including sailing on land, so using a craft with wheels, but that has sails. And so it's a real sort of sailing enthusiast as opposed to sort of someone from the military background. But his company can then apply those autonomous sailing craft for ocean monitoring, and so that monitoring could be for the military, but also could be for environmental monitoring or weather monitoring, things of that nature. Then Joby Aviation, which created sort of silent electric flying cars, for want of a better term, but essentially small flying craft to carry special forces into behind enemy lines to reduce the risk of detection. Because helicopters are loud, and the bigger the object, the more likely to be detected by radar. And then Anduril Industries, the famous, very becoming quite large and successful new defense company, products company. Almost you sort of to think of if SpaceX has somewhat revolutionized, or has somewhat, is massively underplaying it, has revolutionized access into space and providing launches. Anduril, I think, wants to do the same, but for defense. Okay, part 7 of this video. Are there any other entities like DIUx in the world, and in the military or otherwise? This is more from my own knowledge as opposed to from what's in the book. So in me understanding what DIUx is and then sort of thinking wider. So NATO have a thing called DIANA, which stands for NATO's Defense Innovation Accelerator for the North Atlantic, which was established in 2021. It felt like there has lessons that have been learned from the DoD's DIUx are being embedded in NATO's DIANA. I don't know that for sure, but it just felt like there's something there. But it's an accelerator. And accelerators essentially provide funding early to firms to advance their product, as opposed to something that's ready for adoption. Then another sort of that came to mind, so Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, different again from DIUx. So this is origins in World War II. I think their first project was to take the Whittle's jet engine from Gloucester in England and integrate it into an aircraft in California. But then they've gone on to make various very famous and important aircraft like the U-2 and the first stealth bomber, the Nighthawk. So that's an example of where, and the term skunk works is almost become a not even associated with Lockheed Martin, it's become a term unto itself. And so they were a organization separate from the main organization and given a lot of autonomy to create capabilities that the large organization, the bureaucracy wouldn't be able to handle. In the book, they do talk about China's military civil sort of fusion programs, and where civil technology is essentially always available for the military, and that in countries like the United States, due to the politics and the law, the military can't just demand technology off of civil firms. Another one that came to mind to me was In-Q-Tel, which is the CIA's venture capital firm. And then, I personally have been involved with development of technology road mapping systems for the European Space Agency, and that was always framed as that we would be separate from the main organization deliberately to ensure that progress could be made without sort of some bureaucracy blocking things. And then also I did a lot of consulting for Ford Motor Company, and they have a unit based in California that is completely segregated from the main organization deliberately. And I just saw an interview with Jim Farley, who's CEO of Ford, and he was saying how his key card doesn't even work for the California entity, that he can't visit it, and he did that, set that up deliberately so that this entity in California could innovate without in any way being hindered by the main organization. So yeah, there are many examples, not directly comparable to DIUx, but within the same broader sort of picture. And clearly, if you get to be involved in one of these type entities, it's important to realize the amount of responsibility placed on them, and that a lot of trust is placed that this new entity will be doing good work. And you really need to show sort of capabilities coming out of it that are special and different from what the main organization can provide. But they certainly have been shown to be very important. So part 8 of this video, what role do the key figures like Ash Carter and Eric Schmidt, who I haven't spoken about in this video yet, but is very important. Eric Schmidt was CEO of Google for a long time. Very important technology, even though influencer underplays it, but yeah, certainly a big guy in the world. So Ash Carter founded DIUx in 2015 to modernize the Pentagon's approach to technology procurement, as we've spoken a lot about. Ash, Secretary of Defense Carter, died in 2022, unfortunately. So he clearly the big shifts that have occurred throughout Ukraine and some of the fruits of this organization, he won't be here to have seen them, but yeah, it does show the importance of planting the seeds, and you don't necessarily get to see the tree grow or the fruit come off that tree. So then Eric Schmidt was the CEO of Google from essentially Google was founded from Larry Page and Sergey Brin out of Stanford based on their PhD work. It then they were advised to bring on a experienced CEO, which was Eric Schmidt, and then on retirement from Google as a CEO, and I think Larry Page is now was the CEO for a bit, and now it's well, the whole company's now a completely different thing, Alphabet. Anyway, Eric Schmidt chaired the Defense Innovation Board and was very critical in pushing for AI, an AI strategy, and he's mentioned throughout the book as advising the authors of Unit X, Shah and Kirchhoff, in how to best interact with Silicon Valley, such that the key ideas can come out. And I think there aren't a whole lot of there are no diagrams in this book, but there are photographs in some plate sections in the middle. So if you get the paper copy, this is the hardback, it's about an inch thick. There are, lots of nice color glossy photographs. We'll just sort of flip through some of these. But yeah, there's a photograph of Shah there flying his F-16, in that case over Afghanistan. Kirchhoff with Secretary of State John Kerry, Ash Carter, photograph of him, photograph in there of the Combined Air Operations Center and the sort of gonculator, this sort of big whiteboard that they were using for scheduling, and then some examples of drones in Ukraine, the satellites that were launched as part of Capella Space. And then some various other sort of photos of the technologies that they funded. Another person who I should mention as sort of key figure. So James Mattis, who was the Secretary of Defense after Ash Carter. So in the US system, when a new president comes in, they get to appoint all of these different secretaries. And so Ash Carter was appointed by Obama, and then when Trump presidency started in 2016, or the election in 2016, to start in 2017. So James Mattis was one of Trump's Secretary of Defense, and he was an enthusiastic supporter of DIUx, which again was very important in that it showed that this entity had value that was independent of politics. Obama and Trump, famously didn't necessarily, at least rhetorically, get along and have much in common. But on these matters, both the Secretary of Defense saw the strong value of DIUx, which is great, which meant that it could carry on. Part 9 of this video, how do the authors portray the global stakes, particularly regarding China's advancements? So some of you might remember in 2021 when China was testing hypersonic missiles, and hypersonic is defined as speeds at 5 to 25 times the speed of sound, and these aren't ballistic missiles coming down from space. These are flying in the atmosphere. And so when this occurred, it was sort of viewed as a Sputnik-like moment, at least in military circles. It perhaps didn't have the same impact on the public at large. When Sputnik occurred, as in Sputnik being the first artificial satellite and was launched by Soviet Union, that started the space race. That was incredibly frightening for the ordinary citizen. But the hypersonic missiles of China, they use in the book, Sputnik-like moments, in that the United States didn't have a comparable capability, and this is only likely to be worse with regard to AI technologies, especially given mainland China's ability to use the data of its citizens. AI systems, a major way to improve their capabilities is big data sets, and China can apply much larger data sets than are legal or even sort of ethical among other nations. And the other sort of key idea is the conflict in Ukraine, and it is worth, if you're interested in this further, to look at there are various resources comparing seeing the evolution of the Ukraine conflict and what's happened with AI systems or drones following paths that are predetermined, such that they can't be they have much less potential to be taken out by electronic warfare, things like that. Okay, part 10 of this video, what does the future of warfare look like according to the book? So they declare technology-driven battlefield, and these trends will only continue in importance of commercial technology, and that Ukraine 2022 is really the preview of what is to come. Part 11 of this video, ethical considerations of AI in warfare. They speak about these sort of dilemmas and the need for international treaties to govern what could be legal or not legal, and how Silicon Valley culture was one to push away from collaborating with the military, but that has changed, especially with the 2022 Ukraine invasion by Russia. Okay, then part 12 of this video. What lessons can businesses and governments learn from the DIUx model? So I've got 4 in my notes I wrote down. Embrace agility and innovation, bridge cultural divides, empower innovators, focus on results, and be tenacious in pushing for these. So embrace agility and innovation. DIUx has demonstrated the importance of agility and flexibility. And yeah, that's really essentially the deep point of all what this book is describing. Bridging cultural divides. So just because another part of the world, be it Silicon Valley, West Coast, US versus sort of East Coast, Washington, DC military style, just because there are sort of cultural incompatibilities potentially, doesn't mean that they can't work together for a common cause. And so it's important to foster public-private partnerships and things of that nature with those who have capabilities to bring, rather than just avoiding them for sort of cultural reasons. The importance of empowering innovators. So those examples I gave of these different technologies that have come out of DIUx or have been funded by DIUx, they're all created by innovators who if the DIUx hadn't been supporting, maybe these things would never, they would have died on the vine, these ideas and things like that. So it's important to allocate funds to keep them going, focusing on the results. So it's no good just saying that you have a better approach, you've got to prove it. And they did that with, one clear example was the air-to-air refueling application. And then, I'm saying sort of tenacious in pushing for these principles. It took a lot of effort and hard work, and your budget being zeroized is might be enough to put someone off continuing, but they didn't. They kept going, and so you've got to always think of it as 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But as long as 2 steps forward, 1 step back, you're still making progress forward. Okay, part 13 of this video. So the book's reception and impact. There's lots of very important people in the history of technology, and also technology innovators themselves, and military people who are listed as the book blurb, people who are recommending the book. So Walter Isaacson, who's the biographer of Elon Musk and Steve Jobs, he's right on the front cover there. Yeah, inspiring, a riveting reminder of how protecting our nation's security can be, and how it depends on the ingenuity of a select few. They must read. So this person who studied multiple high-impact innovators. He also wrote a biography on Einstein and Benjamin Franklin, who was an inventor among being a founding father of the United States. Reid Hoffman, co-founder of LinkedIn, and he was a member of the PayPal mafia, a very early employee of PayPal. He's got a ringing endorsement of the book. Unit X is terrifying but also hopeful. General David Petraeus, I can never pronounce that correctly. He was the former CIA director, and again he's supportive of the book. Vince Cerf, who was a co-founder of the internet, and then General H.R. McMaster, who you may know from is now at the Hoover Institute, a fellow at the Hoover Institute, and was an advisor under the Trump presidency, if I recall. Okay, and then part 14 of this video, so my concluding thoughts. Before we get into that, remember that if you want the notes, just look on the link below and they'll be sent out. And there should be lots there for you to implement in your own work, your own organization. So yeah, the book presents a pretty compelling case for an urgent need for the US military, at least, to adapt to the technological realities of the 21st century. and to incorporate technology that is more advanced in the commercial sector. And that this, if they don't do this, then will risk being obsolete when compared to adversaries. But the challenge is integrating these technologies into the bureaucracy is much bigger with regard to these people and organizational issues as opposed to the technology themselves. And it's really a big call for action for integrating commercial innovation into defense. One interesting idea that I picked up was having technologists as members of your military's reserve force. Normally, reserve forces are people who do a certain amount of military training and have a certain obligation to train each year, and then have their normal jobs. But these people then will at times be called in to actually fight in the war. And they speak about how in the book that because so much of warfare is that of technology and development of technology and integrating technology, that to have reservists whose all their obligations are that of technology development and integration, as opposed to actually fighting with a rifle or flying an aircraft or something like this. This would then reflect the realities of the 21st century. Then if we think about this isn't just a story of military, we can apply it to other large organizations. That's civil aerospace could be an example. How can a firm like Boeing or Airbus? I mean, Airbus had a division in Silicon Valley. I think it was called Airbus X, to do something similar to what DIUx has been doing, keeping ahead of competitors by integrating technology is a challenge, especially for large organizations. And the famous Innovations Dilemma by Clayton Christensen is essentially an exploration of this and how your smaller competitor can be an entrant into the marketplace and unseat the incumbent, even though maybe the incumbent actually invented the technology. So these lessons extend way beyond defense, but defense is because of the pressing nature of developments, and also because the competition on the battlefield, on an active battlefield, is so pressing, you get results from it very quickly, and so it makes a good way to explore these ideas. So yes, you should certainly pick up a copy of Unit X: How the Pentagon and Silicon Valley Are Transforming the Future of War by Raj M. Shah and Christopher Kirchhoff. I've been Joshua Sutherland. Be sure to get the notes from the link below. There's other links there as well. There's a newsletter you can sign up for, so you'll get all the updates. And also, if you subscribe to the YouTube channel, you get the updates. So great, and look forward to seeing you soon.